meeting to order. It's amazing. It is March already. Before we move on to tonight's agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our remote meeting format. On March 6th, actually, lost my script. There we go. On March 6, 2020, I issued an emergency proclamation declaring a civil emergency in the city due to the COVID-19 outbreak. On March 24, 2020, the governor issued Proclamation 20-28 relating to the COVID-19 emergency and open public meetings. The proclamation has been extended until termination of the state of emergency or until repealed by the governor or legislature. Due to these proclamations, tonight's meeting will be held entirely remotely. The meeting will be recorded, streamed live, and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. This is an exciting night tonight as we have the public with us virtually in the meeting as well as on the phone. So for those members of the public who are joining us this evening, thanks and welcome. I'd like to explain a few aspects of the new meeting format. For City Council, the meeting experience will be very similar to our past platform. For these WebEx event meetings, you are considered panelists. And if you'd like to view those attending the meeting, open the participant panel. There you will see a list of panelists and attendees in the meeting. Your videos are viewable by meeting attendees, as are any visual presentations. There are more options in the meeting chat now. Please use all panelists in the chat to relay a desire to speak. Please continue the practice of identifying yourself before speaking, as there may be still individuals who are joining this meeting by phone. For the public joining by computer or smartphone, welcome. Your video and audio is turned off automatically. If you'd like to make a comment tonight under audience comments and you did not already sign up in advance, please raise your virtual hand. We will show you some visual instructions in a future slide. When it is your turn to speak, your name will be announced and you will be moved up to us as a panelist. You may then unmute for your 5-minute comment period. You may also choose to turn on your video during that time. You are able to send a chat directly to the host, but not to others. And at this point in time, we'll take a moment to do a roll call of the council members in attendance. So please say here when I call your name. Councilmember DiMichele?
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman?
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Hall?
Here.
Thanks. Council President Hunt?
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Martz?
Here.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Ray?
Here.
Thank you. And Councilmember Walsh?
Here.
That's 7 of 7. The next item on our agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance, and if you could keep your microphone muted, I welcome you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is audience comments. For those of you who submitted the online form to make comments, your name will be called shortly. For those who have joined us tonight and would like to make comments but did not sign up in advance, please raise your virtual hand. To do this, if you are on a phone, press *3. If you have joined by computer or smartphone, see the displayed tip sheet. Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak or indicated a desire to speak this evening?
Not at this time.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, written comments can be submitted at any time to the City Council at citycouncil@issaquah.gov. Council President Hunt, do you have any email comments to summarize on any of tonight's agenda topics?
And Mayor Polly, can I interrupt? I'm sorry.
Sure.
We have, my apologies. We didn't have anyone signed up in advance, but we do have an individual who'd like. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have an individual who'd like to make comments. Give me just a moment.
Great. Thanks, Tisha.
Okay, call-in user with the first 6 digits, 425677. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now. You have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Maupin. I'm a resident of Issaquah and have formerly been on the Human Services Commission. And I wanted to comment on the homelessness outreach. My indications have been that it's been very successful. I hope that this program will continue, and I would love the City Council to give consideration to having some kind of a drop-in center for people who need the services so that they have a place to go, especially when we have really cold weather. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. City Clerk, have you seen any other indications of a raised hand or desire to speak?
I don't at this time. I'll make one more announcement. I don't see that we have any members of the public that have joined us by computer, but I do see a few more phone-in callers. So if anyone wants to make comments, please press *3 on your phone. That's *3 if you'd like to make comments. And I don't see that anyone else is interested in speaking.
Thank you, City Clerk. I'll go back over to Council President Hunt and see if there are any email comments to summarize on tonight's agenda topics.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Council President Hunt, and while we are doing virtual meetings, I am summarizing email comments that we are receiving on topics that are on tonight's agenda and emails that we've received since the last time we've discussed topics where we've discussed them multiple times. And on tonight's agenda, we did receive a few emails. One individual commented on AB 8132 PSE Green Direct 2 First Amendment, which is on consent for this evening. This individual wondered why it wasn't closer to 100% of renewable energy in that agreement, so had a question on that. And then for AB 8074, Arch Administrative Budget and Work Program, which is on our regular business agenda for this evening, this individual expressed some concerns around the administrative funding and expressed that their preference would be to cover projects or that the funding would be used to directly impact affordable housing stock, and then had some concerns and questions around the goals. And then regarding AB 8075 2020 Arch Trust Fund, generally expressed support for Arch, again, wanting those funds to be used directly for impacting and increasing the affordable housing stock. And then in January, not directly referencing this, but on the same topic of Arch, and related issues, in January, we did receive an email that expressed concerns regarding Imagine Housing and Allied Residential, which is the management company that manages properties for Imagine Housing. And that concludes the emails that we've received on tonight's agenda items.
Thank you. We will move into committee and regional reports, and we'll start with Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Councilmember Hall. No report this evening, but a couple quick announcements. The next meeting of the Cascade Water Alliance Board of Directors is Wednesday, March 24th at 3:30 p.m. On the same day, the Affordable Housing Committee of the Growth Management Planning Council is also meeting at 1 p.m., so that'll be a busy day. And I'll have more information to share on the agendas for those meetings at our next City Council meeting on Monday the 15th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Councilmember DeMichelle.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Councilmember DeMichelle, and I too have no report tonight. Thursday, March 4th, the Healthier Here Governing Board will be meeting, and I'll be joining that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMichelle. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Walsh. Last Friday, I attended the Issaquah Chamber of Commerce meeting where we discussed some, including the $250,000 grant allocation which they were very interested in, as well as having Chief Beerbaum of the Issaquah Police meet with the chamber members who have expressed concerns about increased burglaries, particularly in retail and self-storage. The information that was presented at that meeting can also be found on the Issaquah Police Department's website in the data section, where they were talking about the increase in certain types of crimes that we've seen in the last 6 months versus that same period in 2019 to 2020. And they were very appreciative of the time with Chief Beerbaum, and so we'll continue to follow up on that if needed. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. Next up is Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Lodging Tax Advisory Committee met virtually last Thursday, February 25th, and you all on the council will recall that the council approved $100,000 for grants for tourism initiatives, and the first half of those grants were awarded last fall, and the process for the second half, the second $50,000, is beginning now. The committee approved the process and the application, which was largely the same as the last process. Applications will be accepted for about a month, so until early April. And then the committee will review those applications and make funding recommendations to the full council, probably in May. The committee did agree to accept applications for tourism related initiatives and organizations that had received funding last time, but with the specific express acknowledgement that there is no insurance that they would get additional funds, but they may apply. And the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board of Directors will meet virtually next Thursday. March 11th at 4 p.m. One of the primary agenda items the board will be addressing is the interlocal agreement with the cities of Issaquah and Sammamish regarding the COVID vaccine partnership that is on our agenda tonight, which is Agenda Bill 8126. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Councilmember Martz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Martz. The Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management Policy Board will be meeting this Thursday, March 4th from 10 a.m. till 12 noon. It's going to be a little bit different of a format. There's going to be a discussion item on regional housing strategy needs assessment, key finding, and next steps. And then there's going to be breakout sessions to discuss regional housing strategies further, which should be interesting. It's not entirely obvious to me how those are going to work, but it'll be different. And then we'll come back together for a group strategy discussion at the end of that. So I'll let council know how that goes. Then Wednesday, March 10th, the Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee will have their meeting. That's also going to be a little bit different. There's going to be a couple of workshops, a King County Countywide Planning Policies workshop, and then a Best Starts for Kids levy workshop, which the latter, I'm sure if history is any judge, will be about how do you decide how to spend the money and how do you oversee the spending of the money, and how might a levy proposal look that comes in front of the public. I will report back on that as well at the next council meeting. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Martz. Deputy Council President Ray?
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Chris Ray. The King County Growth Management Planning Council met on February 24th. Of significance on the agenda was an update from the Affordable Housing Committee related to amendments to their charter, as well as some updates to the Housing Committee's membership. There was a briefing on Urban Growth Capacity Report and a briefing on the 2021 County Planning Policy updates, including an overview of where we are with the planning policies, discussion around the housing chapter, highlighting proposed changes to each of the chapters in the CPPs, and then next steps. And so this is a meeting is a part of a continuing effort in developing the updates for the county planning policies, The next meeting, before I go to the next meeting, I'd be very interested from Councilmember Martz what SCA picks feedback is on the CPP, so we can fold that into the next meeting of the GMPC. That was a lot of acronyms. The next meeting of the Growth Management Planning Council will be on March 31st at 4 o'clock, and it'll be in a virtual format. And then I have one update related to Eastside Fire and Rescue. And as of today, Eastside Fire and Rescue is officially a not-for-profit municipal corporation and not just an agreement between 5 entities. So that was a long time in coming and something that I know many people here had a lot to do with. So congratulations to Eastside Fire and Rescue for being a thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I just have to.
And
amazing.
And with amazingness, I'll just conclude my report there.
Council President Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The King Conservation District is a natural resource management district, and they do conservation work throughout King County. I serve on the King Conservation District Advisory Committee, and the committee has not met since our last regular meeting, but I did just want to let people know that the election for the Board of Supervisors went live today, and it will be going through March, I believe. So you can vote online. And I wanted to make sure that people are aware about this election because it is occurring at a different time than usual elections. So to find out more and to vote, if you are eligible to vote, please go to kingcd.org. And then additionally, the Title 18 Ad Hoc Committee met on Thursday, February 18th. This is an ad hoc committee that works on the plan to improve our city's land use code, which is referred to as Title 18. And this is a committee of 3 council members, which are myself, Councilmember Goodman, and Councilmember Walsh. We met with the Deputy City Administrator, Andrea Snyder, and Lucy Sloman, the Planning Manager in Community Planning and Development. And we discussed several things. We discussed the RFP responses and the consultant selection and timeline. We got an update on the plan for the sign code, which is expected to be approved or to be considered by council on a different timeline than other items in the Title 18 update. And then we discussed about additional items that might be considered for a separate track from the rest of Title 18. And this was subsequently discussed by the 3 council members that are on the ad hoc committee. And Councilmember Goodman will be bringing our recommendation on this item forward at good of the order this evening, so I won't talk too much more about that, but we will be discussing more at good of the order about that in particular. And that concludes my report. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. Next item on the agenda is the Mayor's report out. There will be an executive session this evening to discuss pending and potential litigation per RCW 42.30.110(1)(I). The item is expected to last 20 minutes and no action is anticipated in open session. I'd also like to give a brief update on the King County sales tax that was just put in place. Last year, the city of Issaquah adopted a 0.1% sales tax pursuant to Washington State House Bill 1590 to fund affordable housing and support services. The sales tax was also adopted by the cities of Bellevue, North Bend, Maple Valley, Renton, Kent, Snoqualmie, and Covington. The King County Council also adopted the tax to cover the remainder of King County. The administration has been working on an agreement with King County, which would allow a portion of the tax to be retained by Issaquah for the Transit-Oriented Development Opportunity Center project. And then the funds would be transitioned to be collected from the tax would go to King County. Given the ongoing work associated with the pandemic, King County's desire to quickly identify and purchase existing hotels with these funds for housing homeless individuals and families, and the county's discussion with many other cities involved, negotiations with the county on Issaquah's tax have proceeded rather slowly. I will keep the City Council apprised of any further developments. Also going to give an update on Issaquah's Community Vaccine Partnership. The Issaquah Vaccine Community Partnership met earlier today for our weekly coordination meeting. Our focus remains that when vaccines are more readily available, we will be ready. Our team is close to securing a location for a drive-up mass vaccination site in Issaquah. Meanwhile, tonight, the City Council is reviewing an interlocal agreement with Eastside Fire and Rescue and the City of Sammamish to formalize our partnership on vaccine distribution and reimbursement. That partnership, along with King County Council member Kathy Lambert and state legislators from Districts 5 and 41, also sent a letter to King County Executive Dow Constantine last week that described our plans for a mass vaccination site and requests for approval of not only operating the site, but also receiving future vaccine doses. Vaccine availability throughout King County and statewide is still severely limited. One idea we discussed today is that once our site is approved, we consider implementing a soft rollout and offer even a small amount of vaccines as supplies allow. I have some great news to share. Our mobile vaccination efforts continue, and Eastside Fire and Rescue is now reaching many high-risk seniors with their second dose. And finally, we're working on how best to promote vaccine acceptance to a variety of audiences, communities, and cultures moving forward. My second last bit of news on my update, and I'm sure most of you know this, REI has selected Issaquah for one of its satellite offices. So late last week, we learned that REI Co-op, a specialty outdoor retailer, recently announced it selected Issaquah as the location for its first satellite office. The nation's largest consumer co-op selected Rowley's Properties' newest development, called 2005 Poplar, for its innovative satellite office. Occupancy is planned for late summer or early fall, and post-pandemic, the building will accommodate up to 400 people at one time. We are thrilled to welcome REI, which shares our passion for sustainability, environmental protection, and outdoor recreation to our city. And the last item on tonight's mayor's report is a recognition for Councilmember Goodman and her 10 years of service to our community. So each year, we as a city recognize our employees for various tenures of service in 5-year increments, and I'd like to take a moment to thank and commend Councilmember Goodman tonight, as she has served 10 years as City Council member this coming March 7th. Congratulations, Councilmember Goodman. That concludes the mayor's report, and the next item on our business calendar this evening is the consent calendar. This was distributed to council in advance, and if authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered together and approved by one motion. Have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
They have.
They have.
Thank you very much. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Okay, seeing none, do I have somebody interested in making a motion? Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I move to approve the consent calendar as it appears in this evening's agenda.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Ray.
This is Chris Ray, second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded, and I will now hand it over to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Starting with Councilmember Walsh,
Aye.
Councilmember DiMichele,
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall,
Aye.
Council President Hunt,
Aye.
Councilmember Martz,
Aye.
and Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. We're now going to move into regular business, and the first item up is AB 8074, the 2021 Arch Administrative Budget and Work Program. The ask before council this evening will be for approval. For this presentation, AB 8074 will be presented jointly with AB 8075, the 2020 Arch Trust Fund recommendation. So I'd like to invite Lindsay Masters, the Executive Director of a Regional Coalition for Housing, to present these items. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm going to try to share my screen. I just want to remember, I was here about a year ago, I think, for the first virtual meeting, presenting on a similar topic. So we've come a long way, and let's hope the technology serves us well.
It looks like we're able to share your screen, Lindsay.
Great.
See your screen. Thanks.
All right. So I'm going to be quickly talking about our work program and budget, which was approved by our executive board last June. And then I'm going to go into our housing trust fund program, first talking a little bit just about the program overview, and then getting into the specific funding recommendations that are before you today. So just in a very brief single slide, I've tried to capture here the big picture of what's new and was done with our 2021 work program and budget. It was adopted, as I said, last June when many cities were at the height of figuring out what some of the longer term implications of the pandemic were going to be. So we tried to take a really conservative approach by holding all dues constant at the same levels that they are at for 2020, and then trying to find other ways to sort of come up with the difference between the growth in our expenses, primarily by establishing some administrative fees, and really just keeping our programs constant, not trying to take on any significant growth this year, but carrying forward our core services. And as a part of looking at our work program, we sought some direction from the board about priorities. That's something we've been trying to do from year to year. We have a big work program, admittedly, and a lot of things going on all the time, but really trying to hone in on what are the top priorities that our cities want to focus on. And so we carried some of those forward this year, and those, number one is stewardship of existing affordable housing. We've been excited to really be making significant program improvements to our home ownership program. This year we're undertaking a much more intentional focus on marketing, and so we're excited especially to help market and sell some of the new homes in Issaquah Highlands this year. Been doing a lot of work planning for that. A second major goal for us this year, which is carried forward from last year, is to try to establish some regional goals amongst the arch communities for affordable housing so we can start to measure and report on our progress year to year. We're going to continue trying to discuss what options for dedicated revenue sources there are. That's obviously a dynamic landscape as there are new sales tax tools in the toolbox and other things going on coming out of the state legislature. And then the first half of the year, work that's actually already underway is we are trying to do some work with a consultant that we were able to take advantage of a grant opportunity from coming out of King County, trying to support sub-regional collaboration and taking advantage of that to do some assessment of our capacity and looking at some of the gaps and potential opportunities for expansion in the future. And then really continuing to make sure we are keeping our pipeline growing, continuing to add more affordable housing and focusing on the projects that have the highest impacts. And then, of course, we did not know what this year was going to look like last year, so we wanted to make sure that we were going to be nimble and responsive to needs that might emerge. Recently, I think we've been having discussions about rental assistance as potentially a big need in this coming year, so we've been trying to facilitate conversations about that. But that's the work program and budget. The trust fund is a really important program. I love talking about it, and we decided this year that we wanted to take some time to step back and look at it as a whole program, especially for council members that haven't had many years of familiarity of seeing projects come up and be funded year to year. But it's really an incredible program that takes advantage of the collective will and investment of all the cities inside, a diverse array of affordable housing projects for many types of populations, geographically distributed throughout the region. So we've been able to fund a wide variety of things over the last close to 30 years now, and have a significant track record for it. Over the years, there's been a set of principles that have really developed over time that have driven the program. We are constantly trying to leverage your local dollars to get the maximum impact. Historically, there's been a 10-to-1 leverage ratio. So for every local dollar of support, there's been $10 of other funds that have come into the projects we funded. We have sought to create broad geographic equity so that every community gets the benefit of some affordable housing, and that people who are seeking housing are able to have choice, significant choice in where they're looking for housing. We have a citizen advisory board and have had wonderful representation from community members, including it from Issaquah and some other communities as well, who really helped to shape these project recommendations before they come to you. And then finally, we are really looking at these as long-term investments. So we have new projects every year, but we are also stewarding a significant amount of past investment in housing. That as that grows, that's going to become increasingly important in years to come. This is a broad snapshot of the program production. We have succeeded in making sure there are projects in just about every member community that has the zoning that affords multifamily housing. We see on the map here that the Housing Trust Fund projects are in green. Complementary to that are all of the projects that we've been able to support through land use and other incentive programs. And together the two kind of are able to address the entire spectrum of housing. Stepping back again, we wanted to take some time this year to start looking at the demographics of who served our various programs. So a few slides here on the trust fund. We've also started gathering and analyzing this data for our other programs, and we'd love to come back another time and share that. The Housing Trust Fund has really, over time, been a critical resource for people at the lowest end of the income spectrum. You can see here the majority of households living in developments are earning less than 30% of income. We've also had a significant share of households who've been able to become housed, who have come out of homelessness, both families and individuals, and find housing within the development. Also a significant share of single-parent households compared to the general population. And then this shows you the racial and ethnic backgrounds of the heads of household within Housing Trust Fund projects. So a significant share of households with people of color in them, and a significant share of Hispanic households compared to the broader renter population in the county. So moving on to the projects themselves, starting here with a project that will be a permanent supportive housing project located in Bellevue, in the Eastside neighborhood, and undertaken through a partnership with Plymouth Housing, a very experienced housing provider that has developed primarily in Seattle up until now, and Horizon Housing as their development consultant. This is part of a larger master development that I'll show you a slide that gives you a visual of what that campus looks like. The funding request here is for a total of $500,000. It will fund 93 studio units plus some additional apartments for on-site staff. And I'm going to talk a little bit about permanent supportive housing in the next slide, as well as some of the key partnerships here that make this development. So permanent supportive housing, if you haven't been able to learn much about it in the past, is a critical housing model for people coming out of homelessness. Unlike transitional or shelter programs, it really is permanent housing, time limits on it or expectations on. It is paired with intensive wraparound services that are designed efficient to the needs of the people who are coming to the program. And it's really intended to be for individuals with significant barriers to long-term housing stability, potentially people who have been homeless a long time, who really need those additional supports with the housing to have long-term success. An important feature too is that it's Plymouth in particular, and together with other providers who operate permanent supportive housing, that it's a housing first philosophy. That housing is the first thing you provide. There are not barriers or other conditions people have to meet before they move in. And then just some of the important building features, things that are very typical of this housing model. There is a big focus on community space and creating venues for people to get together. In addition, there's dedicated space for the delivery of social services within the building. And then there's typically 24-hour staffing and a secure entry in and out. There is a significant research base now that's developed over many years that has studied this housing model. It's showed long-term effectiveness in housing stability, making sure people retain their housing over time. The individuals who are able to move into housing typically experience significant improvements in their health. And then there's been a lot of studies about sort of the overall cost system for this type of housing versus the continued cost of people being homeless, and showing that this overall creates cost savings. So this, as I mentioned, is the broader campus. This project is complementary to previous projects that we have funded and that are now being developed together as one master development. One is the very important Eastside men's shelter that has been long coming. We're excited to hopefully see that finally get off the ground this year. And then another workforce housing development kind of on the upper shelf there of the site there. The next project is being undertaken by Imagine Housing. This is another one that you've seen previously. We made an initial award to the developer here to be able to purchase the property last year. That was a previous award of $750,000, and then there's an additional request here for another $500,000, and that will help to create 76 new studios, affordable at 50% of the income for seniors in Bothell. A project that has been really important to the city of Bothell. They have made the property available for affordable housing. Have undertaken some zoning changes as well to be able to accommodate more housing on the site. And then we have a final project, which is called Horizon at Totem Lake. And this is, and I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to the title on the slide there, but this is a project that's being co-developed by Inland and Horizon Housing Alliance, modeled sort of on the development that is in process at the Together Center in Redmond. That's a project that has a mix of different housing components, workforce housing, as well as housing for people with lower incomes, and hope for to create some set-asides for families coming out of homelessness who would be served by HopeLink. This project is a little bit earlier in development, and so there's still some moving parts with the financing, but the City of Kirkland was excited to be able to provide additional funding, larger funding requests. So we've been able to manage of some in-lieu funds there to be able to respond to their request. Additionally, in the last year, we stood up a pilot program with Microsoft to be able to provide short-term funding from their affordable housing initiative, just as an additional tool in the toolbox to help projects pencil and come together. And so we were able to make the first loan from that program last year, and they've agreed to make an additional commitment here to this project. This provides you a snapshot of all the other funds that are anticipated to come into this project. We have a significant rate of leverage, more than I think we've been able to achieve historically. As I said, it's been about 10 to 1 for ARCH funds, other funds. And here we are comprising about 3% of the total funds. effective projects. And this provides you an overview of all the other arts contributions that are being recommended to help fully fund all three developments. So my video is covering up the amount for Issaquah, but it looks like it's $118,300 in contributions to make these three developments go forward. So I'm going to stop sharing, but I can pull it back up if there's any questions about the slides.
That is great, Lindsay. It's nice to see you again, and it's nice to hear such a long and detailed presentation of what you are working on. I also want to let the council know that we have Kristen Leeson also on hand for questions this evening. And so I'm going to keep my eye on the chat to see if council members have questions or comments, and they do. So we will start with Councilmember Hall.
Thanks, Mayor Pauly. This is Councilmember Hall. Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate the thoroughness. I have a question about the work program for 2021, and I was wondering if you could speak to or elaborate on page 7 under Education and Outreach. It says Housing 101 and Education Efforts. So I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate on that for the council, but also for the community watching.
For sure. Housing 101 is an event that Arch has done over the years, and the primary purpose of that is to sort of provide some basic education to our member cities, particularly council members, but also planning commission members about housing, about the Arch model, how we work together as a couple. I will admit, we had a discussion last year about what does an event look like exactly, and couldn't quite kind of wrap our heads around doing something in person. So this year we're looking at something more of a virtual. We're gathering some input on what's the best format, time, topics to do that. We're also talking to the Sound Cities Association to see partnership there that come together. So still kind of in the plans of what that event used to look like was often a bus tour, visiting affordable housing sites, things like that. In this context, we're still sort of talking about what's going to be most effective and helpful.
Caught myself. Thank you, Lindsay. Next up for questions is Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Walsh. Looking at your budget for the year, I just wanted to dig into, you said you were keeping the member cities' dues steady, but obviously everything costs more every year. And so I see a 728% increase in costs in your other income category, which includes a $45,000 new home ownership program fee assessment. Can you talk through what that is and who pays it, and what kind of impact do you think that'll have on the program?
For sure, yeah. So you might recall we went through an evaluation of that program a couple of years ago, and we received a whole set of consultant recommendations for how to make sure the program continues to be successful and is sustainable, and that we staff it appropriately. Long list of recommendations. We've made a lot of progress tackling those. One of them that was kind of near the top was to try to create a more sustainable revenue source, so that as the program grows and the workload grows, we're able to actually add staff to respond to that. So as a follow-up to that study, we had another consultant who's a national expert in land trust kind of give us what are the menu of options for how we put in some kind of administrative fee or start to collect some revenue from the program. And so she went through a process with our board, gave us some recommendations, and the final recommendation was that we institute a 1% fee that is collected when homes are resold, and that is paid by the seller rather than the buyer, so it comes out of the proceeds from the sale of the home. So we started instituting that last year, and I think we're able to start seeing what that is going to create over time. Again, last year there was a lot of unknowns. We didn't know if there was going to be tax to housing prices, there was going to be a difficult time selling some of these homes. We haven't seen any of that yet, fortunately. But when we developed the policy, the board did sort of have a discussion about what would be our position if that was starting to happen, and some of the homeowners in the program might be experiencing impacts to the equity that they're hoping to get out of home ownership. So we've sort of had some experience with that. We've started to develop some thinking and some policy still under consideration by the board, but talk about the event that there are financial hardships, things like that. How could we waive or reduce the fee? So that's kind of the experience so far, but we're fortunate, knock on wood, that housing prices have not been coming down yet, so there's been sustained demand for homes as they resell.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Lindsay. Next up is Council President Hunt.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the presentation and the information. My question is following up on an email that we received back in January regarding concerns about Imagine Housing. I wondered if you could talk about the role of ARCH, which does fund or which is involved with funding a lot of the Imagine Housing, and then also generally what ARCH's role is in when there are concerns around management or when there are issues around management of properties.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. Big picture is Imagine Housing has been around, I think, about as long as ARCH, so has evolved over that time and has developed a portfolio that has been supported by ARCH cities for the years. A really significant housing provider on the Eastside, and they've got a portfolio that's a valuable community resource. So, big picture is we need them to succeed. We want them to be doing a good job of managing all their properties, and we're invested in making sure that happens. We received the same letter, I believe, that some of our member city councils received, and followed up on that. A number of different things that are also detailed in a memo that was provided to our board, which we'd be happy to share as a follow-up with interested. But we have met with the leadership of Imagine Housing. There was recently a leadership transition there, so there is new kind of approach and thinking about how to respond to community concerns. But in addition to that, we wanted to be able to make sure we have some accountability mechanism, make sure that all the complaints that have come up are resolved. So we held a special board meeting in the last month, it was either late January or first week of February, to discuss the letter and the concerns raised, to bring some additional information that our staff went out and gathered about property conditions, things like that, and then to consider some additional funding conditions that we could insert into this particular funding award that we're acting on tonight for the Sammamish Senior Housing Project. So the board had a really good discussion about that, and we appreciated Wally's participation on the board. And they did vote to approve 2 additional funding conditions that are a condition of any additional future funding going to Imagine. So one of them is about specific issues and concerns that were presented in the letter that are immediate and going on in the properties right now. So we have requested and already received a response and an implementation plan from Imagine to be able to address those. And then that will come with it some ongoing reporting and communication on basically a monthly basis to make sure they're following through with that. And then an additional condition that's about the future project, which is additional contractual language around property habitability for the long term. Does that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. I am looking at the chat and not seeing any additional questions at this time. Give it a second. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. My apologies. Round two, I have another question about the first project, the Eastgate Supportive Housing. Is this the only project of the three with those wraparound services that you described because it's targeted towards people who are at risk of becoming homeless?
It is unique amongst the three projects, the level of services that will be provided. And it's for people who are literally coming out of homelessness. I failed to mention that an important part of that project is the partnership with Congregations for the Homeless. So there's going to be, it's intentionally designed so that people who are being housed, who are coming from the shelter that's developed on the same site, will have a pathway in housing at the supportive housing development. The same pathway is being discussed and hoped and planned for women coming out of the shelter in Kirkland that you also helped to fund through ARCH. So we're excited for that. We're really excited for that permanent supportive housing. It's been absent as a model on the east side, and so we're really filling a gap that is there for people who've been honestly having long-term relationships with Sophia Way and CFH, but the housing isn't there for them to move into. So we're excited about that. There will be some level of services really at the other two developments, but not to that same level.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. It looks like our staff member, Kristen Leeson, has a comment. Kristen?
Hi, this is Kristen Leeson, and Councilmember Hall asked why that one had been targeted as part of the discussion tonight, and that is the only one requesting funding this year as well. The other two pieces, the other two phases of that project have already been funded both in 2017 and 2019. So that's the only piece requesting funding this year.
Thank you, Kristen. I am not seeing any other questions or comments. If someone would care to make a motion. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. I move to approve the 2021 Administrative Budget and Work Program for a Regional Coalition for Housing, ARCH, and approve resolution number 2021-02, authorizing the duly appointed administering agency for ARCH to execute all documents necessary to enter into agreements for the funding of affordable housing projects as recommended by the ARCH Executive Board, utilizing funds from the city's Housing Trust Fund.
And Deputy Council President Ray?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. I have to ask the clerk a question. I confess I wasn't listening to exactly which motion was read. Is this both motions that we're voting on at once?
Yes, both were moved together.
Okay, great. Thank you. So comments or discussion? I'll give it a few seconds. Okay. Seeing none, I will go back to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Starting with Councilmember DiMichele.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Martz.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Lindsay, thank you for joining us. A year is a long time. Your presentation was excellent, and I'm glad Kristen got to pop in there, making her come to a night meeting and at least provide some clarification. Thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to our third item this evening, which is AB 8098, the 2021 Arts Grant Recommendations. And I'd like to invite our Arts Program Administrator, Amy Dukes, to present this item. The request for council this evening will be for approval. Amy.
Good evening, Mayor Polly and council members. Thank you for having me. I am going to share my screen. And there we go. Are you all able to see the presentation?
Amy, we can see your presentation.
Great, thank you. So I'm here this evening just to present the 2021 Arts Grant Funding Recommendations, Round 1. These are being forwarded from the Arts Commission after their review last month, February. And the recommendations include 15 grants that total $82,540. Just to give you a little bit of overview about the Arts Grant Program this year, which is a little different. Our budget is $145,000 this year. It is reduced due to the fact that our major source of revenue, admissions tax, is pretty much on pause with Regal Theater being closed. We are utilizing our fund balance in the Municipal Arts Fund to cover this expense. And because of all of the restrictions that have been placed on gathering and celebrating as a community, we decided to do the grant application in 2 rounds this year. One this first quarter, basically in January and February, so that applicants would have some flexibility to suggest some projects and programs that they would actually be able to carry out right now. And then we will have a second round of applications toward the end of the second quarter, when hopefully there'll be a little bit more clarity on gathering in larger groups as the year progresses. And again, really wanted to focus this round on projects that can be delivered within the Healthy Washington Roadmap to Recovery guidelines, which currently have us at 25% indoor capacity and up to, I believe, 200 people gathering outside. And so the grant criteria hasn't really changed this year, except that we kind of honed in on some words that are important to us. We moved public benefit to sort of the primary, most important criteria. And then artistic value, we actually made a word change from artistic quality on this one. We really want art to be at the core of these projects and programs, and that participants can really have meaningful involvement is what that artistic value means. Feasibility and managerial capacity are really focused on, in this case, in this round, the ability of the organization or the artist to conduct the project or program given our current restrictions, and then just the ability to manage grant funds and provide the financial and participation reporting that we require. And then lastly, a diversity of funding sources and leveraging grant dollars. This means a lot of different things depending on the size of the project, but we just want to see that there are others who are supporting the project or program, and that can just be as simple as volunteers or in-kind support from the community. So here is the list of the 15 grant recommendations. We were really excited to receive quite a good number of new applicants this round. We have 6 new applicants that we have not funded previously. And we feel like this group really kind of reaches far and wide across the community and will make a big impact even for that small dollar amount. And then just to give you a snapshot of how the funding will break out between the 2 rounds. So the Arts Commission is recommending $82,540 for round 1, and that will leave $62,460 for that round 2 application in the second quarter to third quarter. And we feel that that does provide adequate support for a second round of applicants. And if you notice, most of the grants that are being recommended are sort of more in that $3,000 to $5,000 range. So that should provide a decent number of support for other projects and programs that second round. So the recommendation is to approve the round one of 2021 arts grant funding as it's being recommended by the Arts Commission for a total expenditure of $82,540. And I would be more than happy to answer questions, and I'm going to just stop sharing for, and I can come back if we need to do that.
Thank you, Amy. It does look like we have a question. I believe council member, my chat is not scrolling. Council member Hall, is that right? Go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Pauley. This is Councilmember Hall. My question, oh, and thank you, Amy, by the way. Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. My question has to do with the round. So if an applicant, tonight is awarded with round one funding, can they also be rewarded with round two funding? Because it sounded like round one was very specific for this roadmap to healthy recovery. So ostensibly round one applications and round two applications could look fairly different depending on what the public health landscape looks like in the coming months.
Yes, that's correct. We did say that applicants could apply to both round one and round two, and really did ask applicants to focus on what they could accomplish right now in the current restrictions. So if that changes dramatically, we really hope we will see other types of applications. We're crossing fingers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. I'm looking to see if there's any additional questions or comments. Otherwise, I'd be looking for someone to make a motion. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I move to approve funding for the first round of 2021 arts grants as recommended by the Arts Commission for a total expenditure of $82,540.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Ray.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any council discussion? Let's go to Council President Hunt for comment.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I am supportive of the recommendations from the Arts Commission. I did want to raise for Council's future consideration that I think later in this year, we should think about how we might make sure that there is continuation of funding for these arts grants, because as far as I understand, the main source of funding for these grants is the theater, movie theater tickets, and that is still not a funding source right now due to the restrictions and due to the pandemic. And we obviously have a lot of uncertainty around that right now. So I think in the future, later this year, we should consider how we can make sure that this very important funding continues, because I do think it's more important probably now than ever that people have things to do to get together and enjoy the arts. And I will also mention that this is a smaller amount of funding than in the previous year, and we have a growing population. So I would not want that to be a trend, but I understand that this is under extraordinary circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you. This is Councilmember DiMichele. I was really struck when I was reading through the proposal with what a well thought out program this is, and I want to commend the Arts Commission for the work that they did on it, because it really addressed the changes that have come before us because of the pandemic, and created a way for arts groups to respond to the pandemic. And I was very appreciative of all the thought that went into this. I can only second all of the comments from Council President Hunt. The arts play such an important role in our economic development, as well as adding so much to the character of our town. And so if it looks as though we're going to lose funding for this arts fund for the next year or so, I think we need to start thinking about what else can we do to support such a vital part of our community. And thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DiMichele. I'm looking to see if there are any other comments, and not seeing any right now. The motion is to approve funding for the first round of 2021 arts grants as recommended by the Arts Commission for a total expenditure of $82,540. And I will turn it over to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Martz.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
Councilmember DiMichele.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you, City Clerk. That passes unanimously. Amy, I would really like you to take a message back to the Arts Commission as well. They have done amazing work. Many of our boards and commissions this year have been working with extremely unusual circumstances, yet they still put all the passion and drive in that they do. And I have not been able to visit as often as I would like to. So passing on the comments that you heard this evening would be great. They're doing really good work. Thank you, Amy.
Great. Thank you so much. I will definitely pass that along. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. The fourth and last item under regular business today is AB 8126, Interlocal Agreement with Eastside Fire and Rescue and City of Sammamish, and this is with respect to our vaccine partnership. The ask of Council this evening is to authorize this item. The item was discussed by Council at the January 26th, 2021 Council Study Session, and I'd like to invite our City Administrator, Wally Bobkowitz, to introduce this item. Wally.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. You have before you an interlocal agreement between the City of Sammamish, Eastside Fire and Rescue, and the City of Issaquah. As I know, you have been updated by Mayor Pauley over the last several weeks. We've embarked on a pretty unique adventure, and that is to take our destiny in our own hands as far as vaccinations for the COVID-19 virus and come up with our own plan. We've been working with lots of community partners, Issaquah School District, Swedish Hospital, the Costco has been a great partner so far, and many others are elected officials. But really, if we're going to have a mass vaccination site here in Issaquah, we really need to build it ourselves. So we went through Mayor Pauley's direction to Eastside Fire and Rescue and asked for their assistance. From that came this interlocal agreement with the City of Sammamish, and I really want to commend their staff and their city manager for their willingness to really partner with us as we move forward with this. Really still not knowing quite when we'll be able to receive vaccine, but we want to move forward with a mass vaccination site, as well as continue with the mobile vaccinations that we've been doing through Eastside Fire and Rescue over the last several weeks. Fire Chief Jeff Clark is on the call, and the Chief Clark, if you'd like to add anything as far as the work that we have done on the mass vaccination sites or the mobile vaccinations, we'll welcome you to do that at this point.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager and members of the council, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity. I think all of you have been well updated on what's been going on with the vaccines. Wally gave a wonderful summary. We are ready to go when we can secure the vaccines, and there is more and more chatter about the ability of vaccines to be delivered in the weeks and months to come. So we're looking forward to that. And as the manager mentioned, we have been doing an awful lot of mobile vaccinations at this point. It is a daily occurrence now in all of our communities from Eastside Fire and Rescue, and we have been doing really a mass vaccination site on a smaller scale than we're designing here with the tribe, the Snoqualmie tribe, the last 3 weekends, and that is going very well. So we're looking forward to this continued partnership, and we appreciate the vision of Issaquah to put this together and help us move forward on this important endeavor.
And Chief Clark, if I could ask you to talk a little bit about the money piece of all this. This agreement allocates costs, but we feel very confident that all the costs associated with this will be reimbursable by the federal government. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, thank you. So this agreement calls for the max vaccination sites specifically $700,000 in reimbursement to Eastside Fire and Rescue, which we will essentially invoice Issaquah and Sammamish based on a population-based formula. And we are confident that Issaquah and Sammamish will be able to be reimbursed for these activities through the state and the federal government. Initially, we designed the contract so that Eastside would be the one putting in for the reimbursement. However, we've been advised by the state that that would not be a successful endeavor, as currently Eastside would not be able to receive those funds directly. However, invoicing the cities and the cities applying for that will allow the reimbursement. As for the mobile vaccinations, there's $100,000 that Sammamish would, up to $100,000 that Sammamish could reimburse us, and up to $50,000 that the city of Issaquah could reimburse us. To date, all of the mobile vaccination activities we've had have been getting funded and reimbursed from the county. So far, all of the mobile vaccination activities we've been doing, we will not be asking for any reimbursement. And this contract is only, it will be our last source of revenue to seek, and that's just to keep Eastside whole, if and when that's necessary. Hopefully, all of these partnerships will manifest into reimbursement endeavors like we have with the mobile vaccination, where the county is reimbursing us, and hopefully that'll continue as we get into the mass vaccination site as well, but only time will tell with that.
Great. Thank you, Chief Clark. And Madam Mayor, members of the council, we feel really excited about this. We think we are only the second community in King County that has taken its own initiative to put together its own sites, the second only to the city of Seattle. So again, very excited about this, and Chief Clark and I are ready to answer any questions you may have.
That is great. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Wally. It looks like Deputy Council President Ray has a question.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Chris Ray. In terms of reach of the mass vaccination site, would this be made available to anyone on a kind of, if you're eligible, first come, first serve, show up at the site, or what's the population served? What's the thinking around that?
Chief?
Well, I'll admit I have not been involved in the intimate details of this. Andrew Stevens has been handling that as part of the task force with Glenn Huffman. But I will say that once you arrive and you are eligible, we will most likely have to deliver the vaccination. It's as far as how we do the reach and how you become eligible to show up at the site is where we can impact who. In Sammamish, we're facing a question from one of the council members right now about the demographics of vaccinations and the success of diverse subgroups in our population of being able to have access and receiving the vaccine. What we can do is put together a site like this to deliver the vaccination, and we will vaccinate everybody that shows up that is eligible and we have vaccines for. Getting people to the door is where all of us on this call and everybody that we work with through the partnership can help advocate within the community in order to let those folks know who is eligible, how to get access, and how to get to the mass vaccination site. So a roundabout way of answering that question, but we will deliver the vaccine to whoever comes to the site. It is up to us to advocate for our communities to show up at that site, and especially those that may have a more difficult time getting there. And then, of course, we have the mobile vaccination site capability to get to those who simply cannot get to the mass vaccination site.
Thank you, Chief Clark.
Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, if I could just add a couple of comments. Right now, we are looking at receiving the vaccine through King County. So it is possible that there could be some conditions placed by King County. As I think you're aware, the county's operating sites in the South King County and Auburn and Kent. For the last couple of weeks, there's been a 75-year age limit and above, which has been reduced just today to 65. So those kinds of restrictions could be involved. We would probably have some sort of reservation system, again, King County has been using. So our conversations with King County Health has been to be a part of their larger efforts because we would be receiving the vaccine from them. As part of the mayor's community vaccination partnership this morning, just recently this morning, talked about ways to continue to reach out to members of the community who may not have easy access, who may not have English as their first language. And so we are working on additional initiatives to reach out to those populations. Spoke with Monica Negrilla, our Human Services Manager, this afternoon, trying to be creative, leveraging some of the information that's already being produced in multiple languages by King County. So we will continue to do that. So, our efforts here to make sure that the residents of Issaquah and Sammamish are covered. Certainly, Eastside Fire and Rescue is looking at their entire service area, including Snoqualmie, North Bend as well. But we're really committed as a larger community to make sure that everyone who's eligible for a vaccine receives the vaccine as quickly as possible.
Thank you, City Administrator Bob Kritz. Deputy Council President Ray, did you get your answer to your question?
Oh, and then some. Thank you.
And then some. Thanks. I think both the chief and the city administrator did a good job showing that while the clinic or while this mass site may be set up in Issaquah, the geography it serves may be bigger because we are working with, in a partnership with King County Public Health. And just my comments back to the council about the vaccine partnership meetings that we have on Monday is that they're really well attended. There's a lot of excitement. We have the school district, we have Swedish Hospital, we have Costco, we have City of Sammamish, we have Eastside Fire and Rescue, and I don't know who I'm forgetting. But it's really been inspiring to be a part of it. And I'm just so proud of Eastside Fire and Rescue and all that they've been able to do to help us get mobile going. And now looking at this mass drive-through site, it's been a pretty great process. Looking to see if there's any other questions or comments. I will reread the, oh, there we go, Deputy Council President Ray. Comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to do a follow-up. I think that I applaud Eastside Fire and the city for getting ahead of this and projecting leadership and taking our destiny in our hands. I still think that there is some work obviously to do based on what I heard from the chief and the city administrator to work through some of the details. And I would be very much open to the notion of engaging with some of the other Eastside Fire and Rescue partners, as well as maybe some of the other surrounding cities that will likely benefit from the mass vaccination site to help us defer some of the costs associated with standing this up. That being said, I think this is a great idea. I'm very supportive of this motion to keep the ball and get the ball rolling. So when the proverbial iron is hot, we are ready to strike with or without anybody's help.
Thank you, Deputy Council President. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goodman here. And if we're done with questions, I'll make a motion.
We are done with questions as far
Okay.
as I can tell from the chat, so please go ahead and make a motion.
All right. I would move to authorize the mayor to enter into and execute the interlocal agreement with the City of Sammamish and Eastside Fire and Rescue regarding COVID-19 vaccine distribution and reimbursement, and direct the finance director to include up to $256,200 for the mass vaccination site or sites plural, and $50,000 for the mobile vaccination team in a subsequent 2021 budget amendment from the general fund.
And Deputy Council President Ray?
Second.
Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any additional discussion? And I'll keep my eye on the chat. Tola, was that you raising your hand?
No, it's
okay.
Stacy.
Okay, just checking. Okay, comment from Councilmember Goodman?
I probably don't have anything new to add. I just am extraordinarily proud of all the work that we've done together, the administration and Eastside Fire. It's really been a Herculean effort, and with so many uncertainties and issues with the vaccinations and when we get them and how many we get them, and who's in charge and who's not in charge and all the rules. It's just really been a web, and so I just applaud everybody who's been involved. Thank you.
Very kind. Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. With that, we can call for a roll call vote. City Clerk.
Starting with Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Martz.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
Councilmember DeMichelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Thank you for coming in tonight, Chief. Thank you, City Administrator, for your presentation and your comments. We are now moving into good of the order, and I do believe I saw at least one email with a good of the order item. Was it Councilmember Goodman?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilman Goodman here, and it was me. So this is a proposal that is coming from the Title 18 Ad Hoc Committee. That is me and Council President Hunt and Council Member Walsh. And just as a brief intro here, you're all aware that we have the Title 18, the significant Title 18 project, and that is going to go into next year. And there is one part of Title 18 that is, from the beginning, had been moving on its own schedule and track, and that's the sign code for various reasons. And we also worked on a budget for the consultants, and that was kind of a moving target for a while. We've spent a lot of time on that. And then a few months ago, we had the EV charging code pulled out. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but moving on its own track and schedule. And so the discussion that the three of us had this week is about whether we want to put forward some, we started out with criteria and then we changed it to guidelines about suggestions about what the council should do in case we have other requests or proposals to have a part of Title 18 pulled out on its own and moved on its own schedule and its own track. And so what you have, and I'm not going to speak for everybody on the ad hoc committee, they can also speak for themselves. I'm just going to introduce this. So what you have before you is a proposal that says that it is possible that future requests could be made of the council to revise, add, or otherwise address parts of Title 18 on a separate schedule or track than is currently being done primarily holistically. And in light of that, the ad hoc committee recommends that should that happen, that we consider the following guidance. And there are 5 items. One is whether there is an urgency or time sensitivity, or what the budgetary or resource parentheses staff impact might be. Is there other planned work that would be delayed as a result? What benefit, public or otherwise, would be gained, or what would be lost by not pulling the topic out and doing it on its own? Are there trade-offs or potential conflicts with other parts of Title 18, and any other considerations appearing relevant? And we called it guidelines or guidance, and we suggested that the council consider that as a framework for future discussions if there's a suggestion or a recommendation from whatever the source is, whether it's the public or a council member or the administration, to pull something out separately. So we were bringing it out tonight for good of the order for discussion and questions. And the idea was that we would bring it back next time unless there was a huge uproar and you didn't want it. We could consider adopting it. So that's what you have. And all 3 of us are open to questions, and I'll let Council President Hunt and Councilmember Walsh contribute as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So prior to going to questions, let's get some more input from the other 2 ad hoc members, and then I see that there are some questions. So Council President Hunt, followed by Councilmember Walsh.
Thanks. This is Council President Hunt, and I think that Councilmember Goodman did a very thorough job explaining this. We did talk as an ad hoc about that this would be guidance, and this is something to consider when there is an item. And then, for example, of the sorts of potential issues that we thought about, we were thinking about things like where one of our goals, for instance, if one of our goals is to streamline across different neighborhoods a certain part of the code with Title 18, and then there's a specific part of that, a specific neighborhood that is going down a different track and that would have a different code that could be in conflict. So we would want to raise that sort of for consideration with council when those sorts of issues come up with Title 18. And we thought these seemed reasonable. And the last one, which is item 6, any other considerations appearing relevant, also seems like that gave us the flexibility to consider anything else that might be relevant. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President. I'm also going to go to Councilmember Walsh if there's anything you'd like to add.
No, thanks.
Just want to make sure you had an opportunity. Okay, Councilmember Hall has a question.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Hall, and thank you very much to the ad hoc committee. You clearly put a lot of thought into this, so I really appreciate that. So then just clarifying question then, these are just points to help drive a city council conversation, not aiming to answer a yes or no for a specific question before moving on, like a checklist or anything like that. It's just to guide a conversation, correct? I'm seeing some
Councilmember
head nods.
Goodman, or yeah, let's
Sure,
get one of the ad hoc. Okay.
Sure, I'll answer. And if anybody has anything to add, Councilmember Goodman here, that's exactly right. And it says the council should consider and be guided by the following. It just gives us a place to start, and so we're not sort of scrambling or trying to figure out what we might want to talk about. We came up with these at a time when we weren't considering anything else. And it was exactly what you said, not to drive a specific answer, but to raise what we thought were relevant considerations, that any one of these could be relevant. They're not elements and they're not criteria. It's just a framework for discussion.
Thank you. Wondering if we could take down, Tisha, the content, just so that I could see everybody else's faces and see. I'm not seeing that there is much other discussion. And while I'm waiting to see if anybody wants to say something in the chat box, Councilmember Goodman, this would be coming back and be adopted, or this is just guidance as is?
Well, it's my understanding from my fellow committee members that if there was, if we didn't hear any pushback, that it would come back at our next regular meeting for adoption, and maybe it would be a resolution.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm not seeing any additional discussion, but I will wait a second to see if there's any other comments weighing in. Thank you for bringing that up. Is there any other items from council members? Oh, Councilmember Hall, question just in the nick of time.
Thank you again. This is Councilmember Hall. Not necessarily a question about this, but if it is going to be coming back to council at the next meeting, some helpful information for me would be, what is the risk or impact of actually considering something outside of the Title 18 revamp? Because I don't think I have a good enough holistic understanding of what taking something out actually means. So that would be what I'd want. Thanks.
Great comment. Thanks. I'm going to, before I go into upcoming meetings, to see if there are any other topics for good of the order. Okay, feel free to still put it in the chat while I go through the meetings. Some of the upcoming council meetings. There's a special council study session on Monday, March 8th. The agenda items include potential grants to nonprofit organizations, 501c3, 501c4, 501c6, in relation to COVID-19. A city council study session scheduled for Tuesday, March 9th. Potential agenda items include the housing overview, the growth targets, transit-oriented development memorandum of understanding, and a city council regular meeting on March 15th. And the potential agenda items include community courts informational update, Green Issaquah funding opportunity, that's forest carbon credit program, potential grants to nonprofit organizations, 501c3s, 501c4s, 501c6, with respect to COVID-19. And I'm not seeing anything else for good of the order. So as earlier announced, the last item on our agenda this evening is an executive session. There will be an executive session this evening to discuss pending potential litigation per RCW 42.30.110 (1) (I), and the item
I'm going to go on camera in a minute.
The item is expected to take approximately 20 minutes, and no action is anticipated to follow in open session. So as a reminder, executive sessions are closed to the public, and we will now recess into executive session at 8:29 p.m. And City Clerk, do you want us just to stay here, or are we moving to another room?